can't trust, let alone.
In Palestine, freedom for the people in Palestine.
We are here today outside the UNICEF house, the British headquarters of the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, whose lofty mission is to keep children safe. Safe from violence, safe from disease, safe from hunger, safe from war, and safe from disaster. With such noble aims, it's with a heavy heart that we stand here today to demand UNICEF stop its collusion with G4S, a company complicit in Israel's torture and caging of Palestinian children. The British security firm G4S is the world's largest private security contractor. It has been contracted by the Israeli prison service to secure many of its prisons and interrogation centers where Palestinian political prisoners, including women and children, are caged and tortured. Figures for August 2015 show that 61% of all Palestinian political prisoners are caged in G4S secured prisons. This includes 100% of all the children Israel is caging and torturing. UNICEF has 12 contracts with G4S across 8 countries: India, Bangladesh, Jordan, Chile, Lebanon, Djibouti, Indonesia, and Gabon. In total, worth over $1.2 million in 2014. By awarding lucrative contracts to a company that is totally culpable in Israel's torture of Palestinian children, UNICEF shows a total disregard for the safety of Palestinian children who are abused at the hands of G4S secured Israeli torturers. Shame on UNICEF!
Shame on UNICEF!
The United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child's Damning Report on Israel from 4th of July 2013 states that an average of 2 Palestinian children per day are arrested, interrogated, and detained by the Israeli army, that the children are systematically subject to degrading treatment and often to acts of torture, physical and verbal violence, humiliation, painful restraints, holding of the head and face in a sack, threatened with death, physical violence, and sexual assault against themselves or members of their family, restricted access to toilet, food, and water. These crimes are perpetrated from the time of arrest, during transfer and interrogation, to obtain a confession, but also on an arbitrary basis, as testified by several Israeli soldiers, as well as during pre-trial detention. Many Palestinian child detainees are transferred out of the occupied Palestinian territories and serve their detention and sentences inside Israel in breach of Article 76 of the 4th Geneva Convention. A legal study conducted by the Jaconia International Humanitarian Law Resource Center found that G4S has failed to demonstrate a genuine commitment to comply with international law in good faith and is complicit in several of Israel's violations of international law. Similarly, a 2012 report by the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967 criticizes G4S for its complicity with Israeli violations of international law. With so much evidence stacked up against G4S, much of it from the United Nations' own sources, Why is UNICEF in partnership with such a serial human rights abuser? Shame on UNICEF!
Shame on UNICEF!
Listen to your conscience and drop G4S now! We want to highlight the case of 5 Palestinian boys we have been campaigning for that were abducted, tortured and caged by Israel in a G4S secured dungeon for a crime that did not even happen. On the 14th of March 2013, an illegal Israeli settler car speeding along a road on the West Bank built on stolen Palestinian land crashed into the back of an Israeli truck which had stopped to change a flat tire. This simple car accident, in which 4 people were hurt, was later, at the behest of angry settlers, presented as an attack by Palestinian stone-throwing youth. The truck driver's earlier testimony that he stopped due to a flat tire was replaced with a new reason being that he had seen stones by the road and an accident that happened after dark that nobody saw suddenly became a terror attack with 61 witnesses, including the police. Over the next few days, over 50 masked Israeli soldiers with attack dogs stormed the local village of Haris in the early hours of the morning and in waves of violent arrests kidnapped the children of the village. In total, 19 children were taken to the infamous G4S secured children's dungeon at El Jalami and locked up in solitary confinement for 2 weeks in filthy, windowless 1 meter by 2 meter hole in the ground cells with no mattress. In the meantime, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced to the settlers that he had caught the terrorists. When the children, who were mostly 16 years old, wouldn't confess, they were violently tortured and sexual threats were made against the female members of their families in order to force confessions from the boys. With the confessions and the new eyewitness statements, 5 of the Haris boys were charged with 25 counts of attempted murder each, even though there were only 4 people in the car. Apparently, the military court had decided that 25 stones were thrown, each with an intent to kill, and they couldn't distinguish which boys had thrown which stone, so each boy would be charged with throwing all 25 stones. 25 counts of attempted murder. The 5 boys have been illegally transferred to Israel in contravention of Article 76 of the 4th Geneva Convention to Megiddo prison, where G4S provides the entire central command room. In violation of international law, Israel has turned prisons into money-making enterprises, with the boys essentially forced to pay for their own imprisonment. Just 2 weeks ago, on the 26th of November 2015, Israel's military court sentenced the boys to 15 years imprisonment and a fine of 30,000 Israeli shekel, nearly $8,000. If the sentences are permitted to stand, 5 young lives will be ruined with no evidence of a crime, let alone their guilt. G4S provides the security systems which keep these torture dens operational. Prisoners who have survived these hellholes recall seeing G4S logos on the cameras that witnessed their abuse. Why is UNICEF in partnership with a company that facilitates the torture of children? Shame on you, UNICEF!
We want to describe some of the facilities G4S secures for Israel. One of these is the notorious El Jallam Interrogation Center in northern Israel, where Palestinian children as young as 12 years old are caged 3 floors below the surface in tiny children's cells, filthy dark holes in the ground where a child is locked up without charge and trial in solitary confinement for up to 65 days in order to break them. Their only escape in the interrogation room where the children, shackled by hands and feet, are abused and tortured by the Israeli secret police for over 6 hours at the time until they confess to trumped up charges, usually of throwing a stone, which carries a penalty of up to 20 years. Detail of Al-Jalam prison emerged from the testimonies of the children as reported by the Guardian newspaper in January 2012 and documented by the Defense for Children International and the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem. The cell, in 2 meters long by 1 meter wide, it's as big as a mattress without the toilet. You put down the mattress and in front of a hole in the ground toilet, the trench which has no escape. There is no window, the air chokes you. The light is kept on 24 hours a day to inhibit sleep. The walls have sharp protrusions to prevent you from leaning against them for support. The delivery of food is through a locked flap in the door. It's the only way to mark time, dividing day from night by the arrival of food. The breakfast tray is dropped through the flap at 4 a.m. If you don't catch the tray, the food will spill on the floor and you will be punished. The room is barely wider than the 55 centimeters thin mattress that covers the floor. Many cells have no mattress. For interrogation, you are dragged upstairs. On the ground is on an iron ring. The interrogator puts your cuffs through it with your hands locked on either side. The cuffs your ankles to the chair legs. You can't move, like a statue. The sessions can last more than 6 hours. At some facilities, children have been sexually assaulted by interrogators and threatened with sodomy with an object if they didn't confess. Sisters and mothers have been threatened with rape in order to coerce confession from boys. G4S provides the entire security systems for Al-Jalam. Without G4S, Al-Jalam couldn't operate. Why is UNICEF in partnership with a company that facilitates such treatment of children? Shame on you, UNICEF!
Shame on you, UNICEF!
Listen to your conscience and drop G4S now!
Shame on you! G4S!
Arafat Jaradat. Arafat Jaradat, a 30-year-old Palestinian father of 2 young children, aged 4 and 2 years old, married with a pregnant wife, died on Saturday the 23rd of February 2013 after being savagely tortured for 5 days by Israel's secret police Shin Bet in Megiddo prison. He had been arrested on suspicion of just throwing a stone. 5 days later, he was dead. At his last military hearing on the 22nd of February, Arafat pleaded with the judge that he didn't want to go back to his cell because he was being brutally tortured. He had severe pain in his back and all over his body due to the beatings and being hung for many hours during interrogation. The judge was dismissive and the torture continued. Arafat died the next day. Shin Bet claimed he had died of a heart attack, but the autopsy carried out at the National Israeli Forensic Medical Center showed no signs of heart failure or any other illness, but revealed broken bones and found his whole body was covered in strong and excessive bruising under the skin, inside the muscle and along the spine at the bottom of the neck, deep inside the tissue. The autopsy determined the cause of death as nervous shock as a result of extreme pain from the intensity of the injuries, which resulted from multiple direct and extensive acts of torture. Shockingly, it was revealed that an Israeli doctor was involved in Arafat's torture, who had guided the interrogators, giving them the green light for further torture. Arafat was murdered over 2 years ago, yet no one has been charged with his murder. He was murdered in Megiddo prison, where G4S provides the entire central command room from where the entire prison is controlled. Why is UNICEF in partnership with a company that is complicit in the murder of Palestinians through torture? Shame on UNICEF!
Shame on UNICEF! Shame on UNICEF!
Women prisoners. All of the Palestinian women prisoners are also caged in G4S secured prisons. The longest serving Palestinian woman prisoner is Lina Jarboni. She has been caged for 13 and a half years in a G4S secured dungeon. Lina was born in 1974 to a Palestinian family near Acre in 1948 Palestine. Due to financial difficulty, she could not complete her studies and worked in sewing workshops to help her family. In 2002, she was picked up by Israeli security on suspicion of collaborating with the enemy. She, unlike her Palestinian friends, has Israeli citizenship. They tortured her for 30 days at Israel's notorious G4S secured Al-Jalame torture den. Interrogation sessions lasted up to 20 hours at a time. Deprived of sleep, she was made to stand stationary in stress positions for that time. Her joints have never recovered. Between interrogation sessions, she was caged in a tiny 1 meter by 2 meter hole in the ground cell. They brought her brother in and brutally tortured him, beating him mercilessly in front of her to pressure her to confess. When she didn't break, they released him and abducted her younger sister and tortured her, and then they dragged her elderly mother to the interrogation room and threatened to torture her. Her frail mother suffers from heart disease, high blood pressure and diabetes. To save her family, Lina confessed to the fabricated charges and she was sentenced to 17 years in Har Sharon women's prison. G4S provides the specially designed central command room at Har Sharon, as well as the security systems in the prison. At Har Sharon prison, Palestinian women prisoners have to endure beatings, insults, threats, sexually explicit harassment and sexual violence and humiliation at the hands of Israeli guards. They are often forced to undergo degrading strip searches during the middle of the night, forced to squat naked and subjected to intrusive internal body searches for no reason other than as a punitive measure. Women have been beaten and left tied to their bed for a day and a half and not allowed to go to the toilet as punishment for spilling water. The cells at Har Sharon prison are overcrowded, dirty and infected with rodents and cockroaches. There is a total absence of basic hygiene.
Administrative detention is a vile form of internment where Palestinians are caged indefinitely, without charge, without trial, on never-ending administrative detention orders, month after month, year after year. Israel's use of administrative detention largely as a punitive measure, is illegal under international law. Prisoners, including children, are left on rolling detention orders, which can be anything from 1 to 6 months, renewable indefinitely. So, for example, administrative detainee Mazen Natchik has been locked up cumulatively for nearly 10 years without charge, without trial. Detention orders are based on so-called secret information, which never needs to be produced either to the detainee nor to their lawyer. Administrative detention is often used to arbitrarily jail Palestinians where there is no evidence for a trial. It is also used for punishment, as in the case of Palestinian MPs who are often caged to punish them for their political stance. Israel has on average issued over 2,000 detention orders every year between 2007 and 2011. Today, there are around 520 administrative detainees, including 5 young children. Most administrative detainees, like Nidal Abu Akil, have been transferred from the West Bank into prisons in Israel. This is a contravention of Article 76 of the 4th Geneva Convention and prevents their families from visiting them. Why is UNICEF in partnership with a company that facilitates internment of Palestinians by Israel? Why is UNICEF in partnership with a company that breaks the Geneva Convention? Shame on you, UNICEF!
Shame on you, UNICEF!
Listen to your conscience and drop G4S now!